my name is Tina Knox. I am coordinator of the Undergraduate Advising Program. And this is Tyler and Ari. And they are you both fourth year? They're both fourth year medical students through the College of Medicine, University of Illinois, Chicago at the Urbana campus. You guys are probably the last.
No, there's like 4 more.
Ah, 4 more. Okay. So they are towards the end of things, and they were both students here at the University of Illinois. Tyler was actually a transfer student in molecular and cellular biology, and Ari, you were an iHealth student? Okay, and so they volunteered their time just to talk a little bit about their experiences from undergrad to where they are now, and then we'll open it up to any questions that you have for them. Okay, thanks guys.
Do you want us to like talk about undergrad here, or how do you?
What do you guys want to know? And you can ask us.
Let's start by what do you think, as an undergrad, helped you get to med school in the first place? Was there a specific class that you took? Were there specific experiences? Was there anything that you feel like was the most important step or multiple things that you did that got you into med school?
Really great question. I think that I'm going to answer it with a bit of a background about me, so that way my answer makes sense, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
So when I was 18, I thought I was going to be a journalist. I only applied to the University of Illinois and Northwestern, and I promised the story is going somewhere. And when I went to my tour, so I actually grew up in Champaign. I'm a townie. I went to Northwestern's campus and tour, and it was gorgeous and beautiful, and I really, really wanted to write about healthcare and just health and wellness. I really wanted to, I was a budding primary care physician. I didn't even know it. I went on a tour and basically was told that.
All right, sorry.
We just started.
This
is Chris.
He knows everything about me. So long story short, on this interview, I was told that there was no way to do both, like study journalism and be anywhere in the health world. I had to pick one or the other. I know, and there was a very real moment. I was sitting in this gorgeous room on Northwestern's campus, and I thought, what if I have to choose? Duh, I'm going into health. And I just called it health back then because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was like, I will go into the healthcare world. What does that mean? I don't know, but I'll just figure it out. So that was a really big moment for me. And then just knowing that what I wanted to do deep down was to be in the healthcare world and tell people how to be healthier. And so no offense to the MCBers in this room, I chose interdisciplinary health sciences as what I wanted to do. I felt like it gave me a great background. You guys have a wonderful background too, so no harm, no foul there. But I was able to take quite a few courses in more social behavioral economic range and how health is impacted by all of those factors. And so it really got me thinking, there's so much you can do in the healthcare world. There's not just doctor or nurse, there's health policy, health advocacy, blah, blah, blah. So that ultimately just left me with a giant question mark. I took the MCAT junior year because that's what you were supposed to do. I was in a research lab because that's what you're supposed to do. I volunteered at Carl because all the things that someone tells you to do. I did all of it, and then I just didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, and so I took a couple of years off, and I can talk about that at some level. And so it's the combination of just figuring out that there's so much you can do in the healthcare arena, and what do you want to do? That was what was most important to me. And so, again, in a lecture hall several years after I decided medicine was maybe for me, or maybe I wanted to teach, I was realizing that I wanted to have a direct patient interaction rather than research. And so that was kind of the final straw. So just all of undergrad and then the 2 years I took off led me to different areas in which I could be in the healthcare world. And then it was just okay, I want to be a doctor. So that was my long story.
So why we're talking about what led you and how did you get into medicine? What got you into medical school? Yeah. So my route was also circuitous. I started out as an engineering major down at SIU for a semester, and I figured out that I didn't care about math that much and calculus and needed to do something different. So I transferred to community college for a year and a half to figure that out. Liked biology, and then there was a lady at my church back at home who told me I should become an EMT, work on the ambulance. And then being an EMT kind of led me more into that world of EMS and emergency medicine. I had a really good primary care doctor when I was a kid, who I really looked up to. So I thought I wanted to do primary care. And then I went back and said, no, I don't want to do that. I want to join the military. So once I graduated undergrad, I applied to the Marine Corps, hurt my back, had to do some things, get some surgeries for that. Decided, okay, I'm going to do medicine, and took the MCAT the year before I got into school. And I actually took the MCAT during undergrad too, but just my own health problems and everything refocused me and told me that I didn't want to go to medicine. Took the MCAT, and then a year later I was here again.
All right. So I guess going back to the beginning, there's I had two paths. One was music, the other being science. So I liked both equally. One being a more reasonable career path, that being science, obviously. Can't really make too much money playing music. But you can still play music as a scientist and not the other way around. You can't really do science as a musician. So I took that route. My parents, my mom's a nurse, so I kind of like had familiarity with the healthcare world. I did some volunteer work just to get into college. Kind of had some exposure, but not much. And then I'm an MCB major. I graduated as an MCB. And I liked a lot of science. I liked what I was learning. But until I started doing MCB stuff, I realized it wasn't really what I wanted to do necessarily. I got involved in research in undergrad, and I would recommend everyone do so, because I don't think until you actually start doing research, maybe not. As an MCB major, you might find that you love doing research, science work, etc. Or you might find that it's not for you, and that was kind of what I figured out. So I actually didn't take the MCAT until I graduated. So I did all my stuff, graduated, and in the interim, while I was in school, during my breaks, I actually worked in the operating rooms at a hospital. Because I started to, around sophomore year, realize, like, you know, obviously MCB is pretty heavily on the pre-med, and that's a very strong pre-med track. So I was exploring that route, so I got involved in healthcare through that, and that's kind of where I realized, like, oh, this is a great route. So I guess, sorry, I'm still ran here. Yeah, so I worked in healthcare, and I realized, like, I'd like to do something involved with healthcare, and I started doing the pre-med stuff. And then I took the MCAT after I graduated, and I worked for a year. I took a year off, and I really thought, like, is this really what I want to do? I applied, I got in here. I thought, you know, I still had time to say, like, I don't want to do it or not. And I just really thought about it for a while, and I took the leap, and now I'm here, and it's pretty sweet. It's hard work.
I think that something that you'll get out of this panel, and if we had all of our class in here, there's no one way to get into medical school. There's a way that someone will tell you is correct. There's a way that I would tell you has worked for me. There's a way that Tyler and Chris will also say that it worked for them. So we should have made that disclaimer.
Yeah.
We can only offer you what has worked for us. And also I think that the three of us really found out what didn't work for us, and that's almost as valuable.
Yeah, the part I left out is I actually applied here and got in right after my last year in college and decided to decline it to pursue other avenues.
So I actually did the same thing my junior year. I took the MCAT, and I said, applied to a handful of schools, got it, did the whole interview thing, got in, like, but you know, it's a lot of effort. And then my, at the time, boyfriend but now husband, he was in a band, and he toured the country for almost 8 years, and really developed a profound sense of who he was and what he wanted to do, which was advocacy and social justice. And he, much like Chris, realized he couldn't quite do that with a pair of drumsticks, but he could probably do it with a law degree. So he only found that out after quite literally living like a vagabond in a and also 5 other guys, and playing his music in almost every state. And so I thought, like, I have only ever done school, much like probably most of you. I was like Queen Supreme High School. I was very involved. I did a lot of, like, literally was only good at school, and taking 2 years off was amazing in terms of developing who I am as a person outside of school. Because once you become physicians, you'll all be people outside of your job too, and that was really important for me.
You'll need people outside of your job.
Can you talk about the structure of like M1 and 2 and 3?
Yeah,
Each
sure.
year of med school?
So M1's almost a repeat of MCB core curriculum.
It's really, really nice that it's a baby, because you have to do all 4 years over again in 1 year, so it's very intense.
Yeah, so it's like in 1 year you take, I'm gonna lose it now, but biochemistry, physiology, anatomy, histology, embryology, something else, genetics, brain and behavioral, brain behavioral, human development, all at once. And then you take there's a test in each one of those classes, and it all happens during 1 week.
Depends on which program you're in.
Yeah, it varies, but like this is our experience. So it is the MCB curriculum on steroids. And it kind of makes sense, right? Like you can get into med school with an MCB degree, an IHELT degree, or an arts degree, and so you have to make sure everyone's on the same page. That's what your first year is.
And second year, it gets, at least for me, it got better because you start getting more clinically, so you're doing pathophysiology, so you start studying diseases, you start studying pharmacology, which is the drugs, and some psychiatry.
It's like first year is how does the body work, and second year is what goes wrong. And then third year is your clinical years. So every school does this different, but there are core clinical experiences you have to have, which include the pediatrics, family medicine, OB/GYN surgery, psychology, and
Psychiatry.
something else, pediatrics, and sometimes neuro. But anyways, there's 6 to 8 to 12 weeks that you're literally just in the hospital or clinic working. And then your fourth year, it's a little bit wishy-washy because you start to take the classes the clinical rotations that apply to you and your specialty, and then you start applying to residency, and then.
You guys have questions for that?
So after explaining that part, so let's say that you don't really know what you would like to do as a specialty, like applying for medical school, because obviously you don't have exact experience in that certain specialty, right? So would you say that that's like something that's necessary or good to have, like when you're applying? Like, are they really going to be looking for this? Is it something that you just have to be so passionate about? I mean, obviously, like you may be passionate about like studying medicine and all and that stuff, but like about a certain particular thing.
I think as long as you have a reason that you want to go into medicine, you can explain that it doesn't matter. We had classmates who, up until we had to find out or figure out what they wanted to go into this year, they didn't know what they wanted to go into. And some people went back and forth on things. I did actually as well. So first year through third year, you've got all that time to explore, shadow other specialties that you might be interested in, kind of get a sense of who you want to be as a doctor.
So that's what that third year is really for them.
Totally.
Yeah, and I mean, you get a good idea that third year of really what it's actually like to be that type of doctor. They're worlds apart. So I went into thinking I was going to do anesthesia, and then I was thinking psychiatry, and then I was thinking emergency, and now I'm doing ear, nose, and throat surgery, hopefully. So it's really, I think, going into it with a preset notion of what you want to do, unless you really know a lot about it and you know it's perfect for you, is really kind of, it's hard. It's good to have like a goal or have an idea of what you're looking for, but until you actually get involved in it, that's kind of when you start discovering it. And that's basically what third year is for, and even the beginning of fourth year, that's when you start doing your elective stuff. So you might not get exposure to certain fields in your third year. If you have an interest in something, say like orthopedic surgery, bone surgery, you don't get to see that in your third year, but on your surgery rotation, You might say, ask the person in charge, like, this is actually something I've been interested in, can I spend a few days, get to know what it's like as that type of surgeon, and then say spend a few months over your summer and your 4th year exploring that more deeply before you apply. But it's really fast, so I would say, going into it, it doesn't hurt to not know what you want to do, and I would say, if anything, it would hurt you a little bit more, because then you're kind of like, when you finally discover something else that's a lot nicer, it might be too late, but going into it without knowing what you want to do, as long as you kind of, the whole general overarching theme of medicine is ubiquitous across the board. Everyone's there to help people, to treat people, to learn about disease and science and be a scientist. That's present in every field, but until you do each individual field, they're totally different.
I would say if you do decide to go this route, and even if you have your heart dead set on something, don't hold yourself to it in medical school. Explore other options and be open to the idea of maybe I could do this, because I thought I hated psychiatry. My experience with psych patients was acutely psychotic, in your face, screaming, as an emergency medicine technician. But then I got into it, and I realized it's a very vulnerable population, and you got to protect those people. You got to help them out. A lot of people don't understand what's going on with them, and you do as a medical provider.
I've been trying to think of a good metaphor or way to compare an experience that you have to kind of put this into a framework that you would understand. And this is probably going to be very dumb, but think about your senior year of high school, and you're looking at the freshmen, and you're they're so excited to finally be in a high school, and they're talking about what classes they should take as a senior, and you're just like, whoa kid, pump the brakes, you don't even know what high school is like yet. That is what medicine is like. You have no reason in sitting in your position, unless you maybe have a parent or you worked for several years before coming to college in the healthcare field. You've never been exposed to what it is to work as a physician, and that's why I think experiences in college, like EMT, volunteering over at Carl or OSF or doing phlebotomy, those are great because they can allow you to be present in the healthcare world, but there's nothing like being a medical student or physician in training in the specific fields, because there's just no way to know. And something that I really kept reminding myself is you guys are all incredibly smart people. You're very, very good at probably everything, and the world of medicine is so alluring, and so you have to think whatever skill sets you have is going to fit within a field, and you're going to do so well, and it's so exciting to think you get to be whatever doctor you want to be. And so even though you could be the best OBGYN or gynecologist in the whole world, you really like primary care, which I guess this is kind of dumb, but say you could be the best surgeon in the world, but you also like primary care, it's totally up to you to figure out who you are as a physician. And it's just a really exciting thing during the M3. And so don't let it be a burden that you don't know what kind of doctor you want to be yet.
So I'm a senior, and I know I'm doing at least 1 or 2 gap years. And so I've kind of looked into scribing or medical tech or EMT stuff. You kind of go through other options or other experiences that would be helpful.
So scribing sounds amazing because you get used to writing notes and seeing the medical jargon, how doctors talk to patients, etc. That sounds amazing. I was just talking to a student about being a scribe. Really good precursor to medical school. EMT is really good. Any sort of technician under nursing staff is really good. I think it's just anything about
It doesn't actually. I would say I did a little bit of everything. I was an Alumni operator. I did a healthcare tech thing with it. I was a substitute teacher, and I worked in a doctor's office, but I was just doing paperwork and answering calls. And I've heard other people say it doesn't matter. Just don't be doing nothing for that year off. Go do something that you want to do that enriches your life experience and kind of sets you in the path that you want to be.
So someone who sat on I've interviewed you guys for the med school 2 years in a row now, and best applicants can speak passionately about what they've been doing. So I know that someone once told you that you should research, and I know that someone told you to volunteer, and I know that someone told you to, like, you know, just do the things that you have to do to get into med school. And so we can all say, like, yep, I volunteered, yes, I researched, but if you let yourself be involved in 20 different things, let's be realistic, how passionately can you speak about it? And so, say you like medicine, but you just don't like research, and volunteering hasn't been that fulfilling, but you absolutely love the social justice work that you do. Like, you absolutely love volunteering at the food pantry, or Chris's Nursery was a place that I really loved volunteering when I was an undergrad. Just something that filled you up while also allowing you to do good and work or volunteer or something, because let's be real, it's gonna go on your resume, it's gotta make you look good. But you have to be able to speak passionately and honestly about it. But if research is your thing, that's awesome. Like, get involved and start saying yes to everything. One of my close friends in medicine was an art history major, and her year or two off, she was in Italy working at a really, really small arts museum, like teeny. And then through interactions with the curator's dying grandmother, Mrs. Carden, she realized that she wanted to maybe become a geriatrician or someone who works with older adults when they're dying. And so this girl had never taken a science class at all, but had this aha moment and went back, did a post-bac, because you have to have certain classes. And then that's what she talked about in all of her med school interviews, was like being in Italy, working at an art museum, and just like seeing all the things that made her want to go to med school.
And I think there's something, this is my own philosophy, either being a tech or an EMT, or going to work in the grocery store in Stock Point. I think that says something, getting that real world experience, being a low man in the totem pole, that you appreciate where you end up, like where we're going to be and where you guys are going to be. You appreciate it. You don't get as annoyed at that nurse or tech when they're having trouble because they're seeing 5 other patients and telling them to order. They can't drop anything right then, so I didn't understand why. So that's how I still look at it. I think I appreciate what the techs and nurses do more because of that experience.
And then if you don't want to do anything medically related at all, take those 2 years and do something totally unrelated, work, travel, have fun, as long as you're passionate.
Yeah, I took some amazing vacations that have really sustained me when I've been in the library for the past 4 years. Like, I got some beautiful pictures of Paris and Australia and Barcelona in my house that I can look at and be like, oh, thank goodness, I took those years off and I got to travel, because it becomes fewer and far between when you get deep in the trenches of medical school.
And going off of what you said earlier about not overdoing yourself, like, this is, you guys are, what you're doing now is hard, it just gets harder, and you gotta keep it up. So you want like a good pace. It's, to use a cliche phrase, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. So doing 20 things in undergrad and burning out in undergrad, you're gonna have a hard time getting through medical school. You won't be able to keep that pace up in medical school.
And there's been such a paradigm shift. I'm pretty involved with medical education and medical education development, and the types of even applicants we're looking for. And it used to be you had to have, straight A's, which I'm not knocking. It's important to get great grades, and you had to do research and you had to volunteer, and that was that. But now a lot of schools are putting quite a bit of emphasis on the well-rounded student, and because physician wellness and student wellness has become such an important topic in our field because of things like burnout and physician suicide rates being so high, that we're realizing that there's no mold, there's no one person, perfect prototype to become the perfect doctor. And so application committees are really looking at you guys holistically. It's not to say that grades are not important. You do have to do well. You should probably volunteer in some realm.
So medical school seems kind of daunting to me, and like a lot of people have said it's not what it used to be, and people are saying,
Who's the people?
so many people, I don't know.
You know what's interesting is like how can you compare it to something you've never done? Keep going.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And I've heard all these things about how being a PA is like better than being a doctor. So do you have any counters to that on why being a doctor is better than a PA, or like make
Well,
it seem not so daunting.
PAs have to answer to us, right?
Yeah.
No, I think that, you know, it's really what type of expertise do you want in something. The PAs, they get 2 years of training. They can go float around wherever they want. And I think being a PA is a great option. I was actually considering PA school too.
And when he says float around wherever you want, you can jump in specialty.
Yeah.
We have to do a whole residency before we get
Yeah, and once you're kind of in your specialty as a doctor, you're kind of in it. I don't think there's any change yet. You can change in residency, a little bit harder to do, but once you're a professional, that's kind of where you're going to be. PAs, they can work in the emergency departments for a few years and say, you know, I want to try something else. They can assist surgeons for a little bit, but it's really, it becomes an assistive role. You kind of see what we would call the bread and butter, meaning the very standard diseases, things that you see it a few times and you understand it already, and you kind of see the more boring things, honestly. A lot of times when physicians have PAs, the more simple things, the things that a physician would think is kind of a waste of time, ultimately goes to the PAs, and the doctors see the more complex things. So if you're okay with seeing kind of either simpler things or things that are a little bit more repetitive, PAs, at least in outpatient setting, meaning primary care, maybe a surgery clinic, etc., is pretty good. And then, like as a PA with surgeons, they often assist the surgeon, but they're not the ones doing the surgery. They're holding things for the surgeon, helping. They might be cutting and stuff, but really the ship is still led by the physician. So you have to ask yourself, you know, are you okay being told what to do? Are you okay having kind of a limited expertise but being able to go anywhere you want? Or do you want to have the utmost expertise on your field, be the professional, and really kind of have the say-so in the treatment plan for the patient? And that's kind of, and also PAs are kind of on call with the doctor. So if that's another thing. That was one thing that kind of persuaded me from being a PA. When I was working, like, one of the nurses was like, the PAs are on call just as much as the doctors. They're there just as much, so why don't you just go all the way? So I was like, oh, that's a really good point, Rudy. And then I went the doctor route. No, both are really good fields.
So,
It's just what you prefer.
I'll just throw in my 2 cents about life, and also being the only female on this panel, I'm gonna take it there. But so my 20s, straight gone to medicine. And I say that with a smile on my face because I absolutely love this field and I'm so excited to go into it. But because it takes such commitment, I have put having children on hold, and that is a conversation that I have frequently with my female colleagues and my husband. And everyone, like, yeah, I was gonna say men have it too. Like, it's just like, okay, so right now, I'm in school, and then I will be in residency, and they actually just removed the work limitation cap from interns, so we used to be capped at 80 hours a week, which is 2 times normal, and now there is no cap, and that's a discussion for later. There are pros and there's cons to that. So even to get like even deeper, we were trying to have a child 4th year, and that just didn't happen for us. And so now I'm in this field where it's going to be a couple years before it's okay to have a child again. And so that is just something that's had to shift. My brother got married, and we're Indian, and so there's a big ceremony, and they decided to do it in Jamaica. And so like, I guess I should go further and say Indian weddings are traditionally several days long. And I was only given a Friday and a Monday off of my clinical rotations to be at my brother's wedding that I was going to be in, so I missed out on that. And so there's quite a bit when you dive into medicine that you will miss out on. That's not to say that like this has been the worst 4 years of my life. It's been incredibly rewarding, and luckily I have a family structure and my friends who are very supportive when I'm not there. They'll like send me the Snapchats, they'll like bring over food afterwards. So that's, you know, medicine. And if you think about, okay, a PA, it's 2 years and then you're working. If, you know, what are your priorities? And then I would also challenge you, most of you are super, super young. Your priorities will change, and they should, because that means you're a human that's adapting in your environment. And so you just have to make the best decision that you can with what you feel like is important to you right now, and that'll change. And then the last thing I'll say on that is, like, your life is your life. I say I'm putting things on hold, but realistically I'm becoming a physician, and that's a very active thing. And so I just had to like shift around things, like I'll have a baby in a couple of years.
So I thought about PA as well. I've got a lot of friends who are mid-level providers, which is what nurse practitioners and PAs are. Again, it's a personal choice. I wanted to be the end-all be-all, the expert in my field, and have that say, and I love the autonomy. And my wife's from Asia, and we might move there someday, and a PA license doesn't work there, so I moved down to MD, which was another motivation. But PAs I know are really good at their job. They're experts in their fields, depending how long they spend in that. I've got one friend who was trauma and plastic surgeon's PA, so he's very good at surgery and sewing. Other friends with family med, they're very happy. They have kids already and like an active life. So it's gonna have to be your priorities and what you want to do.
And you can have kids in med school.
Yeah, you totally can. We've got classmates with kids. It's just a different route. It's a real challenge.
Totally met an intern with 3-year-olds.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
What's your name?
Sorry.
A Paige. Paige. Okay, so going off of what Paige said a little, so I have a mentor who's a physician now, and I was shadowed her over winter break, so just like maybe a month ago or so. And I was telling her some of the things like how you mentioned, Ari, right?
Yeah.
How you mentioned like students do like 10,000 different things, and it's kind of hard to focus on one thing. And I was just telling her a little bit how there's like this kind of pressure that I feel. I don't know if anybody else feels this way. It's like a pressure from like other classmates, like you listen to like all the things that they're doing and all the things that they're involved in, and just like all the stuff, or even just a pressure from just knowing that there are so many things available to do and that you feel like you should be doing because it's like routine to get into medical school or just putting you on the track to be there. And so like I was telling her about this stuff. She's like, oh, I feel like at that point then, if I were a student your age, like I probably wouldn't even get into medical school or something like around the lines like that. And so I was just gonna ask, like, how did you guys like feel this pressure as well when you were undergrad here? And how did you cope with it?
Things outside of medicine, hobbies. The pressure's real. You know, the competition. There's competition. They'll say there's no competition wherever you go. Life is a competition. So it gets really annoying with time. You know, hearing about everything they're doing, and you're like, oh man. Sometimes I'll look at myself. I'm not doing too much. I'm not doing X, Y, Z. Like, oh, everyone's doing this, but I'm not. As long as you're passionate about something, you know, something that you can talk about passionately when you're on interview trails, as long as you're doing what you like to do, I don't think it makes too much of a difference. There are obviously standard things that you need to get. Is it standard? Like,
It's like standard-ish.
Standard-ish. Like, I didn't volunteer prior to getting into medical school, but I did research, and I think that I think that hurt me a little bit because I think people were looking more towards volunteering than research, but I decided I wanted to do everything research, and that's what I did. I just dove into my research stuff. I ended up getting into medical school, and I think a lot of people around me had a ton of research opportunities. Like, I was looking at applications even for, like, when I'm applying now, and it's like, you need to have, 8 to 10 research opportunities, and 6 to 10 publications. This is for residency, 6 to 10 publications, and this and that. And I don't have anywhere near that kind of those numbers, but I think people do have those numbers, and it's definitely stressful. But if you have something you're passionate about, if you're easy to work with, if you do things and you put your heart into it, and you have a few things, but you really dedicated yourself to that, and you could show that you really dedicated yourself to those few things, then there's something there for you. Instead of spreading yourself thin, being very robust in a few things. And I think people are receptive to that as well. So when you have, it's a number game, like, oh, I volunteer here, I volunteer there, I do research here, I do research there, I also work and all this. And if you do a few things, but you really do it well, I think that also sweeps
So
And then you're next.
tracking back, like when you guys were applying to medical schools, what do you guys focus on in your personal statement?
So, I wrote about why medicine, which is like so dumb. But I was working as a lab coordinator over at Beckman, and I was also an associate professor in the College of Applied Science in the 2 years that I was off. I went down a different life track. I thought I was going to do the PhD route, and so I was like, Chris, I got very involved in research, but I wanted it to be more socioeconomic, psych, and neuroscience-y. So I never did any bench work. And this is a very real moment. I was sitting in a lecture and we were talking about all the research that we have done, which was looking at nutrition and fitness in children and how it impacts their learning capacity. And it was this amazing high-level discussion. And we were talking about how good like certain nutrients in are for children learning. And then the very next day, I was bringing in the participants, which were third graders, to the study, and like half of them that day were all eating McDonald's. And I didn't tell a single mom or dad, like, hey, we just published this amazing article that says you need to be eating these nutrients and totally avoiding that McDonald's bag. I just felt a heavy burden that I wasn't doing enough. And that's what I wrote about. And then I talked about it. And so imagine if I had only half butted my research and I wasn't passionate about it and I wrote about that and then I got asked about it in an interview, it wouldn't have been impressive. But because that moment was real and I felt such a heavy burden of a sense that I needed to be doing more, that came across as very realistic, because it was in my interviews.
I would say there's a lot of the same stuff in every, like I talked about my work as an EMT, a couple calls that I was on, and some health issues that my grandmother had. But I think as long as you're sincere and like passionate about whatever you discuss in your personal statement and can talk to it in the interview, that's what's going to happen.
So I wrote about I had an experience when I was working as a tech in the OR. It was about a surgeon who accidentally cut someone's aorta, and yeah, it was bloody. So I got to see how a team under pressure works as professionals, and actually the guy ended up being perfectly okay, and like they cracked his chest and they pumped his heart with their hands. The anesthesiologist did. I got to hold his legs up to get blood to the brain, and I was like, holy crap, this is intense. So I wrote about that, and I was like, yeah, it would be really cool to know more about, because I had no idea what was going on. They were like, you hold those legs, and I was like, okay. But I had no idea what was going on. And there's a drape, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what's happening? And I wrote about how I wanted to know more about, what happened, how they did it, what is the thought process? All these surgeons were so cool and collected. They're like, scalpel, all this stuff. And I'm like, I was probably the most nervous one in the room, and all I'm doing is holding legs. So it was more about just wanting to know more.
And I know we have a question over here, but you mentioned being a tech.
Yeah. Like
an OR tech and different things. What requirements are there to be a tech?
So, yeah, it varies. Luckily where I was at, it was a teaching institution, so they taught their techs on site, and they didn't require any sort of certification. Here at Carl, it would be considered a CST, the C being certified, something tech. Surgical tech. Some certified nursing. Yeah. So, and you could work anywhere, like where I was, you could have worked on the floors or in the OR or whichever. And the only reason I got the position was because my mom worked in the OR, so she kind of hooked it up. But with that being said, some places require prerequisite certification, others don't. So it's really facility to facility. So if that's something you're interested in, say calling around the hospitals around where you live and figuring out, do they require that?
Part of it is like a surgeon.
Yeah, and it's like a summer course too. I was actually supposed to be taking the course, and then I got sick, and I had to drop the course, and then I got called, like, right after I dropped the course and got better. I was sick for a month. Like, the hospital called me, and they're like, oh yeah, by the way, we're looking to hire, or we want to interview you, and we don't require that CST thing. I was like, things must happen for a reason. This is sweet. Didn't have to pay for it.
So I think it's pretty safe to say that you guys think that you've changed a lot as a person from like freshman to undergrad to where you are now. So are there any like just like life skills or character traits or anything like that that you think you developed in that time that's really helped you get to where you are now?
Some mental and physical fortitude.
So I learned to ask for help.
Yeah.
I learned to make it clear what I needed emotionally from my very amazing husband, which is a hard skill to like be like, hey, I need help doing things. I learned to believe in myself more. Most of this came from failing in those realms, and then learning that I can do better.
Yeah, I'd say a lot of it circles back around what you were talking about, just mental health. I've done a lot more meditation. I've actually, the school pays for psychologists, so talking to him once in a while has helped out too, to kind of cope and deal with all the stress and pressure between the classes and licensing exams.
A more like medically tangible thing that I am really uncomfortable doing things that I'm not good at, which is like a really weird thing to say out loud to a room full of strangers, but I don't like to do things that I'm not good at. And that's all medicine is. Like I've never, the first time I sutured, I was so nervous, and thank goodness my resident that I was working with was like, oh, calm down, take a breath, like stand up straight, because I think I was like trying to stitch someone up like this, and I think that's not how you do it. And so I made a conscious effort at the very beginning of our third year of med school, M3, to challenge myself more. And so I started rock climbing because it terrifies me, and I knew that I could, it's so dumb, but you know, actively find ways to be the director of your own life. And so it's just something I knew about myself I didn't like to do. And that also just taught me like, hey, I'm not very good at suturing, and I don't like looking like an idiot, so I went home and it motivated me quite a bit to that. So when you're like, please don't try to teach yourself how to suture, but in an area right now that you see yourself struggling, find a fun way to do better.
And I think even if you did do anything, and if you did do anything actively, continue this pathway, like the challenges you're going to face are going to change you, and it's just kind of part of growing up. And it doesn't matter what field you go into, that's going to happen naturally.
I think being open to change is pretty is key, because I mean everything changes all the time. So your experience might be totally different from someone else's, but just kind of being susceptible in allowing for change to happen. Or even another thing I know is like when we got to third years, you know, we studied for the board exams second year, and at least I felt like, you know, after studying for a while and like we went through these books and we just took all these classes, it was like, man, I learned so much, I'm so ready for this, I know all this stuff. And then the first day of third year starts and you actually get to apply your stuff that you learned clinically, and you're like, whoa, what did I don't know anything. So I guess for me it's, you know, constantly assessing, you know, what you don't know, and just kind of striving to better yourself through that. And that's just kind of the kind of person I became through medical school. I don't think I was like that in undergrad. I don't know if that undergrad wasn't really kind of so. Yeah. So it just your kind of thought process changes in medical school, and it's not for. It just happens so naturally, and I think when you're more susceptible to change and just kind of going with the flow, it kind of helps a little bit. Stress.
Also things like interpersonal skills, those are important. You're going to need to be able to communicate with literally any type of person in any sort of hierarchical chain, and understanding respect, but also self-advocacy, self-confidence, and, you know, humility, those soft skills that are often undervalued, those are important.
You'll learn to stand up for yourself in certain situations, and I think the biggest one is asking for help if you understand. That goes in 1, 3, and 4. administration, professors. Anybody else?
So do you have like extracurriculars and stuff that you do in med school as well to get into residency?
So, you're like, the way you phrased it at the end was like, oh, baby, you don't necessarily have to do extracurriculars. Depending on what you want to do. I know orthopedic surgery requires some publication.
Apparently ENT.
And like some of the more illustrious competitive fields. I know for me though, my extracurriculars kept me sane. And oh, totally. And like when you apply for residency, it's similar to applying for medical school. You have to like write all this stuff down on a website and people will talk to you about it. And so again, do something you're passionate about. Kind of helps if it's in the medical field, or if you're a pediatrician, if you want to go into pediatrics and you've been volunteering at crisis nursery, it's probably not a bad thing, right? Or if you want to do orthopedic surgery and you run marathons and you volunteer at the health fair tent, like, those go hand in hand. That's great. So,
But again, if you didn't do any of that and you decide last minute you want to specialty, you could probably make it.
it will never hurt you unless you're doing too much, and then it will really hurt you because you're going to be too tired.
And there is time for extracurriculars. Like in medical school, you have a life still. Like I mean, I've gotten to still play music. I think everyone's kind of done their own thing.
Oh, boy.
Travel, etc. It's definitely not as fruitful as it was, but you still have plenty of time to do extracurriculars. Not medical related. Like you were asking about residency. There are like certain fields are going to have certain things. If you have an idea of what you want to go into, there's certain things that it's just like medical school.
But you can even start that kind of stuff after like one.
Yeah.
What is that silly expression, like drinking fire from a water hydrant?
I didn't do anything in M1.
Yeah, M1 always.
And fun stuff. Like it was either I was having fun with my friends or studying as hard as I could. I didn't do any extracurriculars. Like
You just have to get through it, and then you're open. I can study and have fun and do something good for the world.
And going off of that, I think it's also important that you guys both had some of the others too, is making time for your family and your significant others becomes really important. Because it's really easy to just slide into doing all these other things and neglecting that part of your life. So it's all about maintaining that balance, which we're still doing.
So you guys are in the process of applying for residency now.
Yeah.
Can you talk about like the competition with that? Like if you want to go into a specific field, is there a possibility of not getting a residency program? Then
Part of me wants to be like, don't worry about that. But then the reality is like, you're gonna worry about that.
It does happen.
okay.
It's kind of, it's about managing expectations and balancing what you've done and what you think you can do and listening to those who've already done it and your administration and yourself.
So meaning like, there are tangibles. Your first board score, which is called your step 1 score, that is really, really big. It can, if you pass, that's wonderful, but certain fields require higher scores. So if you don't get a higher score, you have to manage those expectations accordingly. Say during your clinical years, for some reason you don't necessarily excel in like, across the board interpersonal communications, and that is on your transcript. The fields that really value that, like psychiatry or primary care, that's something that you're going to have to manage those expectations again, right? But typically people don't match, tell me if I'm wrong, because they've overreached what they
Exactly.
reached.
Exactly. So if you want to go into orthopedics, don't try to like go to the top 50 programs in the country. You might go lower. You can try to apply to a few of those, but make sure you apply to some of the other ones. Or maybe if you're interested in another specialty, some of us did that as well.
Or, day one, you want to be an orthopedic surgeon, then buckle up. You're going to have to study a lot, and that's great. You're going to be so smart. You're probably going to have to research, so you're going to manage your time really well.
And then you get thrown.
And and so just like, I just remember thinking all of undergrad, like, people keep telling me to calm down, but to get into med school, you have to do so many things, and I have to plan every year, 2 years in advance, and I always felt behind. Like, yeah, that's life in this crazy field that we are in love with. So you just have to realize that, like, in time, everything will happen. You guys are so young. There's not just one field you can go like this and still end up being in a position. But yeah, the competition is quite real.
So do people just get like a second choice residency program, or like you get into residency somewhere, right? Okay.
I applied to 2 fields, one being my top field and then the backup field, like for that very reason, because of the competition, and it's really annoying, just because you're like, we applied in September and we find out March, it's like a whole half a year, but, so you just kind of sit and wait.
And it's quite complicated system
Yeah.
that I should get into, but there's a supplemental.
You get a good idea of
Yeah.
the competition and everything based on, you know, throughout, we take multiple exams, board national exams, your grades in school. You get an idea based on that, as we were saying, kind of where you, as far as you can go, like things like neurosurgery are very hard to get into. That's what you want to go into right out of the gate. You're kind of going towards neurosurgery. But you can also just kind of wing it and get involved in it. I mean, Ryan, he's winging it. He's going into neurosurgery. He's got a great background though. You're going into neurosurgery. Yeah. Which is crazy because he's super chill and like you would never peg him to be a neurosurgeon. But yeah, and he's got a good background. He's just, you know, he did well on his base, he said, and that has a lot to do with it too. Like your 4th year, you do rotations out of your own home school. At schools you might want to do residency at, and they get to know you at a more personal level, and that's a big portion of the application. So if your grades aren't there, or you don't have enough research or volunteer work, working with the people, if you know, like I know I'm a good worker and I know that I can hack it with these people, showing your stuff is probably one of the most important things.
That's like years away.
Yeah, that's so.
So don't stress about that. Like, think about it one more time and then never, don't think about it.
That was more just like curiosity, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
Yeah, don't think about that right now, don't stress out.
We probably have time for 1 or 2 more questions. What else do you guys want to know about?
Were there any specific resources on campus that you used that would like help you like kind of like know what you wanted to do and like where to involve yourself?
In terms of like field of specialty in medicine?
No, like during undergrad.
Like
During
things-
undergrad,
like
to get in.
things to,
Like did you like any advisors or anything that like I don't know like helped you know where to apply like your skills and like what to do?
so Tina was always good for me, and then I also went to the Career Center, they helped. But the lady who advised me, was in New York City, so. She was awesome.
She was great.
Not that that helps you guys at all.
There are still some good people at the Career Center. I can recommend some.
So I was an interdisciplinary health major, so my advisor, Julie Bobbitt, was a godsend. She helped me, so I would encourage you to talk to your advisors and see what they have to say.
And yeah, I would actually talk to your major advisor first, because not that not all the people at the Career Center are not amazing people who really want you to succeed, but sometimes you can go to the wrong person for your personality, and that actually happened to me. Yeah, I was like all excited, I was gonna go talk about it, and she's like, just shot down my dreams.
It's like Karen.
It was Karen.
She did that to a lot of people. She's not here anymore, but there would be certain students that I would know not to send to her. We should cut this out, but there would be students that I knew couldn't handle it, but then there would be students who I knew needed somebody to say, listen, this is what you have to do to get to med school, and you're not there. And so I would specifically censor. I don't think I did that to you.
No, everybody was like, oh, she's great, and then I went, and I knew it was going to be hard to get in, I had no qualms, and I was like hopeful because of all my experience in it. She was not right for my personality whatsoever.
I went to the MCB advisors and stuff. I was actually general studies before doing MCB, so I had 2 separate advisors. But I was always on track to do MCB. I just got in through general studies. Yeah, I barely got into college, so. So,
Maybe just
don't be
like
discouraged.
find someone who's doing what you want to be doing and just ask them questions.
Were you guys involved in RSO's like pre-med club or anything like that? You were in IEMS, right?
I did IEMS, which was its own pre-med thing, but yeah. Some of those generic ones are just too generic and too big to really, yeah.
So when I got into college, I was super burnt out. Now I realize it. But I was so involved.
Into college?
Yeah, I know, right? It's not a good track record. I was so involved in high school that when I got to college, I was like, woo, I'm not doing anything for anybody. Which is like not who I was a person. So I promptly got involved at Carl. And I had someone give me really great advice to do one thing really, really well. So I did Carl, and I researched, he's just writing our emails. And I did those 2 things really, really well, and that's all I did.
Really quickly, I just wanted to ask, like, did you guys get any funding or scholarships for medical school? And like, applying and things, did you consider like the cost of tuition when applying to different schools other than others?
This is our medical school is one of the most expensive in Illinois. And it's a state school, which is crazy. Yeah, there's scholarships available, and absolutely, please do not go into crazy debt for literally anything in your life. Like, there's resources available. Make sure you find them.
Yeah.
What was the deciding factor or factors that made you choose to either go to Illinois or apply to Illinois rather than like any other medical school?
This was the only one that was accepted at.
So for me, I was trying to stay in Chicago, so I only applied to Chicago schools, and I got into USC, and they do the satellite campuses. The Chicago one was full by the time I applied, so when I applied, it was a little bit too, because it's rolling admission. Everyone, when they say it opens up and to apply early. That's my one thing I recommend, and someone recommended to me, and I did not do it. But Chicago filled up by the time they accepted me, so I came back to my home campus instead of Peoria, Rockford. But yeah, that kind of led me. It was more geographical where I applied.
Yeah, mine is even more geographically specific. My husband was at UNI's law school. I think we were just dating at the time. But so I only applied to like 4 medical schools. And I put that I wanted to go to Urbana first. And so I got one.
Wait, so you only applied to 4 medical schools? I know a lot of people apply to like 25
I applied to
plus.
30, yeah.
So, yeah, so.
30?
Yeah, I did.
I applied for as well.
To me, it was, I wanted to be in Illinois. And I made that to me was always a very important part of my decision, very close to my family. I think I was engaged, I don't know. It was most like, I did it because I wanted to be with him. And we decided that we felt really strongly about that. So I went to schools. Which is kind of on the abnormal side. I think most people apply. I had and have a deep tie to this geographical location. It would have been very detrimental to my overall success as a person to apply all over the country and to be living in like Rockford, right? Or that's not a different state. California.
Close.
Yeah.
Tired. We've been out for a while.
Yeah.
I didn't want to move, and I knew that was important. So, but if you don't have like, I don't know, I can't give you a number, but it would probably behoove you to apply to more than 4.
Yeah, I was told not to apply to only 4, but I was saying like, if I have to leave, I don't want to go to medical school if I have to leave Chicago for it. So that was my thing. I was like, I'll just apply again next year if that's the case. And then Urbana didn't sound so bad when I got it, and worked for a half a year and thought about the acceptance. And I worked for, actually it was more like 9 months, maybe a full year before I got in. And then when you're working for a while, you kind of realize how fun it was to be in school. And I was like, please, I'll go anywhere.
So I think it kind of comes down to, you look at costs, you look at the programs and what they have to offer you if you're interested. I really liked, Virginia, VCU, they had like a pet therapy program there, like, so I went there. And your geographical preferences, you have families that were want to stay here, and like, great. We had one attending who wanted to get the heck out of Illinois, and she went to New York Medical College. So, again, it's all personal.
Like statistically, if you apply to more, they'll probably get more interviews, right? So.
But also logistically applying, so I don't know how you manage with 30, Tyler.
It's expensive.
Well, so expensive, yes, but then also you have your primary application, and then you get all your secondaries, and
Which
so
also
like
costs money.
Chris was saying, it's rolling admissions. So even if you, let's say June 1st, you put in your primary, then when you get your secondaries, I have heard that you want to have your secondaries done by Labor Day. So if you have 30 secondary essays to write that are all different, right? The secondaries are
It
typically.
doesn't, I don't remember, I think I just reused some stuff.
There is some themes, I remember. Yeah, I remember having a different folder for each program that I applied to, and like copying and pasting themes.
Okay.
But then like,
But some questions they ask are totally different. And I totally forgot about the primary and secondary. So I've heard that you want to send back your secondary as soon as you can after you get the secondary. I think I sent mine back I actually know what day it was Halloween I sent mine back. And that was a really bad idea because I was sitting on it for 2 months. And you send that impression oh, you probably don't want to go to the school here. So getting them back as soon as possible is preferable.
you're fine.
Can you guys recall being asked like a really difficult question or something like that in an interview that really just stumbled you up or never thought to think about, or even an application question that really got you good or something like that?
I had the most traumatizing. So, yeah, things like you're right. So I go here now. I was interviewing at Peoria's campus, thank goodness, and somehow it came up that my husband was in law school, and the interviewer was like, "Oh, so you must be an expert on medical legal issues," and I was like, "No," I didn't say no, but in my head I was just like, "No." And then he asked me, he posed a very difficult question, if there was a car accident in which there was a Jehovah's Witness family, and the mother and the father were fine, but the child was critically injured and he needed to have an emergent blood transfusion, but the parents said, absolutely not, we're Jehovah's Witnesses, we cannot, we will not let our child have a blood transfusion, but you knew the child would die.
So yeah,
So what do you do? So he literally asked
We
me
get those wrongs.
an ethics question that I did not get taught in medical school until my 3rd year. He asked me that as I was applying, and he legitimately was right now give me your answer. And I don't remember. I just remember, okay, I guess I'm not going to do alive. So that sucks.
What's the answer?
Yeah.
Children you are able to get an emergent court order of protection, and then you make the decision for them, because the minor is not able to advocate for himself in that situation. And adults, if they're Jehovah's Witnesses and they do not want blood transfusions, or if they're anybody and they don't want a blood transfusion, that is their choice to make.
If they're conscious.
If they're conscious, right. They're decisional, deemed the powers that be, and they sign paperwork, yeah. But a child who always. But that was crazy, right? I didn't learn that until last year, and it's still a loop.
But was it
Probably just wanted to see how
counted
you
against?
react.
Yeah, and that's, what'd you say?
I'm sorry, I was asking was it really counted against you, or?
I got in.
I mean, I'm just asking was he just asking just to be that
I think
person,
what
or-
Tyler and I were just kind of talking about is he probably just wanted to see how I was posed under pressure.
Oh, okay, not whether or not you actually
Yeah.
knew.
One interview that I was actually in, I was the interviewer, that my partner interviewer asked a girl's stance on abortion. And I was like, yeah, I had the same face that you did. I was like, what? I was not aware that was a question we were going to be asking. And she gave the most eloquent answer about how her personal beliefs, her God does not, I don't remember what she said, it was very eloquent, like her God does not believe in abortions, but her job is to provide for the patient, so she would do everything she could to make sure the patient got to be with a provider that would give her the care that she needed. And then when she stepped out, the doctor was like, yeah, I just wanted to see how she answered that question. I don't care what she said. It's one of the ED doctors.
Of course it was.
So they happened. I remember looking at a list of like 500 difficult questions, or it maybe it would have been 50, I don't know. And I just skimmed it and didn't think anything of it. And then I had my Illinois interview. I remember driving home, I called my best friend, and I was just so upset because this was the school I wanted to go to. And I was like, it was so awful. I like have vivid memories of that phone call. I was just driving home from Peoria and I was so upset. It's actually my birthday, so that was fun. And so I got home and my dear sweet husband was just like, we should do something. And I was like, no, and it's fine. So point of that story is like the next day, I like looked at that list and was like, okay, there are ways that I can do better in my next interview. So I just kind of went through some really hot topic like abortion, Jehovah's Witness, just the things that were going on in the political climate, making sure I could answer things eloquently. It was totally safe the rest of the interview trail.
They asked me about HIPAA. That was a hot topic at the time, Obamacare, which luckily I had briefed over before the interview because whatever's in the news, someone's gonna ask. But I think the hardest question is, what questions do you have? Have good questions to ask, because and have a lot of them, because I feel like half of them, more than half of your questions are answered by them just talking to you. It's like, oh, I can't ask a question about something we just talked about. So being prepared to ask questions I thought was important, and ask questions about things on the fly too, obviously. But being prepared to have questions, I think, looking at the website, figuring out what the school's about, what their overall plan is. If you're looking into a specific field, do they have a residency program in that specific field? How do things unfold? What is first year? What is second year like? Going through those things and having those questions is really important because they want to know how curious you are about the program, how much do you care about that program in particular. So that was a tough one. I always think those are tough questions.
I don't remember what that guy asked me, but just like to redirect to more positive, just in case you guys are scared by Marty's story.
It was just one. I had everything else was great.
It's like it's doable. Like applying to medical school, if you really want to do this, it's completely doable. Even if you don't get in the first year, you figure out. You talk to the programs that denied you. You talk to your advisors, see what you can improve, and go again next year. You get that year off. You work. You do something that you love, and reapply. It'll happen.
And you can change your mind.
Exactly.
You can be sitting here right now 110% know that you want to be a doctor, and then something else happens in your life and you want to do that. That's cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Find something you're passionate about. Like, there is no reason for you to have a mediocre life. You guys are all capable of doing really great things. So you should do that. And whatever that means to you, your definition of great is surely different than mine and Tyler's and Lisa's. So you just owe it to yourself to do something you're passionate about.